Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. So, as a homage to one of my heroes, Donna Haraway, the title of my talk is Staying with the Trouble. Let me start by taking you through a quick tour of the seductive promises of our media landscape. The science that will help us learn more about our genetic heritage, preparing us for longer, healthier lives. The gadget that will revolutionize our everyday lives by enhancing our interactions with our surroundings. The ubiquitous technology that will increase our productivity at work. The smart cars that will make our rides easier and safer. The cities that will help us lead more sustainable and efficient lives. The political visions that will fix the mistakes of the past. These sorts of promises, the promises of our media landscape, from the intimacy of our bodies to our relationships, to the places we live and work, all normalized through a steady stream of beautiful pixels. All of them have an important function to present, but the way they are talked to us are fictions. Fictions that make us believe that they really exist. Fictions that sort of remove the sort of intellectual aspect of our lives and make us creating expectations and desires. These are just some of the images that sort of take us through these things. In this context, I'd like to sort of read a quote by Chuck Palahniuk, who said, "The unreal is more powerful than the real, because nothing is as perfect as you can imagine it, because it is only intangible ideas, concepts, beliefs, fantasies that last."
Hands-free driving. Cars that park themselves. An unmanned car driven by a search engine company. We've seen that movie. It ends with robots harvesting our bodies for energy.
Yes, our present is stranger than fiction, and the technological landscape and its implications far too complex to fully comprehend. Just a few weeks ago, a good part of the internet was mesmerized by this, a galloping wildcat robot, made by Boston Dynamics as part of DARPA's M3 program. Some of the calls for innovation that DARPA solicits take the strangeness to a whole new level. Let me just read out an excerpt from one of last year's calls. DARPA seeks innovative proposals to develop technology to create insect cyborgs, possibly enabled by intimately integrating microsystems within insects during the early stages of metamorphosis. The final demonstration goal of the HiMEMS program is the delivery of an insect within 5 meters of a specific target using electronic remote control and GPS. But perhaps one of the most paranoia-inducing symbols of technological power and control is this glossy black building, the NSA headquarters, which has come to represent mass surveillance at its best. In its inner chambers is the Information Dominance Center, modeled on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. Apparently, director Keith Alexander and his allies all took turns to sit on this chair and pretend to be Jean-Luc Picard. A crucial aspect of this sort of state control is the normalizing narrative surrounding technology, a narrative that starts codifying behavior so that it comes to be seen as acceptable. For instance, in April 2013, UK's Caldecott Committee proposed new rules for data sharing that would allow the government to build a DNA database of its entire population for the National Health Service by stealth. Many people have likened this to the idea of a genetic panopticon. DNA has immense commercial value and can be monetized in many new ways. 23andMe, a California-based personal genomics company, recently announced that they have received a patent for a technology that supports an online tool, the Family Traits Inheritance Calculator, which is offering an engaging way for you and your partner to see what kind of traits your child might inherit from you. Apart from a child's eye color and earwax consistency, you can also select a child with the longest expected lifespan over least expected life cost of healthcare. This throws up several ethical questions. Of course, genetic screening for diseases is not seen as unethical, but starting to think about other characteristics determined by DNA arguably borders on eugenics. Staying with that theme, these could be the world's smartest babies one day. BGI, China's and probably the world's largest genomics company, has collected samples from 2,000 of the world's smartest people from China and Europe, and are sequencing their entire genome in an attempt to identify the alleles that determine human intelligence. According to Jeffrey Miller, one of the donors, even if it boosts the average IQ of the kid by 5 points, that is a huge difference in terms of the competitiveness of the country, how many patents they get, and how innovative their economy is. Whilst these ethical debates continue, something else is happening. The tools and the technologies that were once the remit of scientific labs are now becoming cheap and easily accessible to a large number of enthusiasts, resulting in the popular DIY bio movement. This is a lab in a box by Hectaria, which will allow anyone to tinker with DNA in the privacy of their own homes. Of course, it's nowhere near as powerful as the tools available to BGI, but the potential is quite remarkable. It's the same do-it-yourself values that have given rise to the popular maker movement. But now this very movement has become part of government remits. This is a makerspace in a shipping container in Shanghai. It is part of Chinese government effort to make 100 hackerspaces or innovation houses. What was once perceived as a dissident activity is now being welcomed as an engine of innovation, because the economic value of it potentially outweighs any risk. These Chinese hackerspaces are in a way legitimizing a very resilient form of innovation known as Shanzai, which might have been understood as counterfeit products, but it's much more. And the popular dual SIM phones are a case in point. And these are the Shanzai drones. They are China's version of US's Predator drone, costing a mere $1 million as opposed to the US's $16.9 million. You can just imagine the poorer countries using China as a marketplace because they all want to get into the drone war game. And whilst we're talking about innovation with resilient and limited resources, I'd like to share the story of Zemirar El-Ali, an Afghan electrical engineer who built these 5 unmanned autonomous drones made from bamboo and cloth, and they do fly. His unfazed ingenuity in the face of in a war-torn country is commendable and reminds me of something that in India we call jugaad, a can-do attitude driven by necessity and scarce resources. This same jugaad innovation has been applied to warfare and become jugaad warfare, where Libyan rebels put together their own version of an armored fighting vehicle called Sham-2, built from the chassis of a car. Here's the inside view of Sham, where a game controller has been hacked to operate the vehicle's gun turret. This kind of guerrilla innovation takes on a whole new meaning for the Athens wireless network community, where the group of hackers have created their own network, their own internet, in response initially to the government's poor and expensive internet services. But as the news of mass surveillance spread the world, they saw their subscribers soar, with their stated aim of making infrastructure available to anyone who wants to control their own network. So as we've seen, beneath the promises and the hype, our technological landscape hides a rich web of conflicting anxieties, dread, empowerment, and opportunities, where the bow waves of political and corporate visions clash with people's desires and fears. Whenever our work calls for us to make some sense of this cultural turbulence, I'm reminded of a quote by Lebbeus Wood, who said, "Knowing the present is also an act of imagination."
I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
This state of cultural turbulence, technological acceleration, and increasing complexity is something our friend Scott Smith has referred to as a moment of superdensity. In our studio, we've simply taken to referring to it as the new normal. When designing for the new normal, we aim to cut through established narratives about the present and the future, often using stories, cautionary tales, artifacts, and scenarios to explore the sheer breadth of exciting yet often unsettling possibilities that lie ahead of us. But what are the ambitions of this sort of design? Firstly, it seeks to create new perspectives and alternate presents by challenging established narratives. Secondly, to move beyond the seductive simplification of media hype and political slogans and embrace complexity. Thirdly, to look past personal prejudices to see the full spectrum of potential hidden within any technology. And finally, it seeks to understand the true nature of future, to not try and predict future events, but to understand some of its materiality, to really get a feel for truths such as the future is old, it's additive, and it's complex, and to move beyond our culture's blinding predisposition to see the future as a new, well-ordered, shiny, and predetermined destination. So in the time I've left, I'd like to share some of our projects in our studio that kind of explore these ideas further. Dynamic Genetics versus Man is a project where we explore the economic and political implications of synthetic biology and gene therapy. It centers around a near-future fictional court case between Dynamic Genetics, a biotech multinational corporation, who accuses the unremarkable Arnold Mann of obtaining unlicensed copies of the company's patented gene therapies. The project explores themes such as risk and control through a carefully and detailed crafted body of evidence. Let me show you just some of the 31 pieces of evidence we created. This is the mandatory SPIT kit, which was part of the government's DNA mapping program, a cost-benefit algorithm used by the government to calculate every individual's insurance contributions based on potential healthcare costs associated with their genome. Covert surveillance photographs from inside a black market clinic. A forensic photograph documenting the layout of the crime scene. On the right, you see an improvised CO2 incubator used in the manufacture of illegal gene therapies. A batch of counterfeit therapies found in the lab. And footage documenting the defendant's interrogation. The lens of a court case as a superfiction mirroring current world organizations help to construct a powerful narrative about a vulnerable citizen who goes to extreme measures to mitigate the costs of healthcare premiums. Technologies don't exist in isolation. They interact with a rich and complex world and are subject to forces far beyond their makers' control. As designers, we believe it is important to think about wider complexities in order to challenge the deeper assumptions about technological power and control. Within the world of synthetic biology, where nature is being designed, it is perhaps important to think about tangible visualizations of worlds where these new organisms will start infiltrating the environment. Living things are capricious, they mutate. So how will they be created and how will they live amongst us? For a project exploring colony collapse disorder or the dying bee phenomenon, we worked with scientists to create a new kind of synthetic bee that would help pollinate our crops. We even made a convincing diagram of how this bee would be created from the plasmids of 5 different creatures: a fish, a chameleon, the swift, a bat, and a hawk. And then we imagined various positive uses of this super bee, from pollinating crops in urban gardens to being kept as glowing pets. But going back to DARPA's Insect Cyborgs project I mentioned earlier, these bees take on a whole new meaning. Whilst we set out to provoke discussions about the dying bee phenomenon, what we had accidentally created were 3D printed renders of what might be the world's first natural drone. Frightful. And then finally, a project I'd like to share is about the design of prosthetic vision for the visually impaired or the blind people, using optogenetics, a combination of gene therapy and optoelectronic prosthesis. I'll let our scientist collaborator, Dr. Patrick Degenaar, explain.
Patients with retinitis pigmentosa go blind because the light-sensitive cells in their eyes are dysfunctional. The remaining circuitry is, however, intact. In 2003, the discovery of a special light-sensitive protein in algae led to the new field of optogenetics. We can use these special light-sensitive proteins to bring back some form of photosensitivity in the remaining cell layers of the retina. My team is developing a special optoelectronic headset to interpret the world and communicate with these newly light-sensitized cells. It is our hope that with a mixture of optogenetic gene therapy and our headset, that we can return lost vision to these patients.
So, in order to understand how people might react to this new kind of prosthetic vision, they started carrying out image augmentation tests, feeling that people who can't see will at least start feeling better to be able to see the world in some sort of a cartoonized outline form. Much to their surprise, people said, "I'd rather be blind than have my world look like this." As scientists, they were approaching it from a very data-centric perspective, whilst as designers, what we were interested in exploring was what will our experiences of and with technology feel like, valuing human centricity over efficiency. The most interesting part of this technology was how the body is being modified to better interface with the machine, rather than the machine adapting to the body's needs. We continue to explore the design for the operating system of this new interface, bearing in mind the deeper connections between the prosthetic and the brain's most vivid functions, that of memory and consciousness. What if we gave people with this prosthetic the potential to be able to see in electromagnetic areas of the electromagnetic spectrum not visible to the normally sighted? So we work with specialist camera equipment to film in these different spectrums and get a real sense of what the world will look like. These are images of me and my partner in crime, John Arden, filming these various spectrums. Whilst the near-infrared gave me white skin and blue eyes, the UV exposed John's misadventures with the sun. And now I'd like to share 2 short clips from a film we made where we imagine a protagonist using this new prosthetic. So this sort of speculative work explores the remarkable potential of technology and its new experiential aesthetics. Moving forward, we are working with the scientists, the technologists, and the end users to explore the near-term applications of optogenetics. These are but a handful of examples that work towards finding new tools and strategies for an effective and informed engagement with what has come to be known as the new normal. Together, such evocative approaches help us to see the world from a new perspective, allowing for an emotional connection with the raw weirdness of our times. Thank you.